What's up, guys? Thank you for joining me. We've got great news for President Trump. The $500 million penalty imposed by Tish James has been thrown out.
Major legal win for President Trump. A New York appeals court just tossed out his civil fraud penalty, ruling that the roughly $500 million fine is excessive and unconstitutional. Let's bring in Andy McCarthy, Fox News contributor and former assistant U.S. attorney. So here's what Judge David Friedman said in concurrence. He said, quote, "What emerges from this court's vacating the $500 million disgorgement award, with which I concur, is the frustration of what appears to have been the Attorney General's true aim in bringing this action. Plainly, her ultimate goal was not, quote, market hygiene, as posited by Justice Moulton, but political hygiene, ending with the derailment of President Trump's political career and the destruction of his real estate business."
That was a Democrat judge scolding Tish James for bringing this case. Now, of all of the warfare and the fake prosecutions thrown at Trump, this one troubled him the most. Listen to Megyn Kelly explain.
I spoke with his team behind the scenes, and we talked about the lawfare that he was facing. And the team made clear to me of all the criminal trials that he was facing, the thing that really had Trump stressed because it was so unfair and threatened his business to its core was this ridiculous possible indictment by Letitia James, not indictment, but civil suit that threatened to bankrupt him. And indeed, she got a hard partisan judge. She's a hard partisan, the New York State Attorney General, who ran for office promising to, quote, get Trump. And then she got a hard partisan judge, this lunatic Judge Engoron. And it was a judge trial. He had no right to a jury on it. And it didn't go his way. So this one was very important to Donald Trump. And not surprisingly, this hard partisan judge threw the book at him and entered a nearly $500 million judgment against him. It is now over $500 million with the interest that's accrued. And today it was thrown out. This was a resounding victory for Donald Trump. The entire monetary judgment has been vacated. It's been wiped out.
I'm thrilled that it was vacated, but honestly, Trump should not have had to go through this. We're going to go over the case, and I'm going to prove to you that Trump did nothing wrong, and he was targeted by Letitia James simply because she doesn't like him. This is what happened. Trump went to Deutsche Bank to borrow money, and in that loan application, he used his estate at Mar-a-Lago for collateral. Now, I don't want to get into the weeds, but we need to talk about something. There is a difference between market value and assessed value. Market value is the price you can get in the open market if you sold your home to a buyer. It is also the value used when obtaining a mortgage. Assessed value is nothing more than a value assigned to your home by the county to calculate your property taxes. That's it. It has nothing to do with mortgages. So this is taken directly from NewYorkCity.gov. This is from the website. Here's the definition of assessed value. Your assessed value is based on a percentage of your market value. So that tells you that assessed value is always going to be lower than market value. And this tax class 1 just means that it's a residential property, and the most the assessed value can go up in any given year is 6%. Assessed value has nothing to do with market value. Here's the example they give you. The market value in year 1, let's say your house is worth $100,000. The assessed value will be only $6,000. In year 2, the property went up 50% from $100,000 to $150,000, but because the assessed value is capped at 6%, the most it can go up is $360. And in year 3, the property value actually went down $10,000, but the assessed value still went up 6% to $6,741. That assessed value is then used to calculate your property taxes. But as you can see, it has no correlation to the market value. Assessed value and market value are completely different figures. And here's an example I pulled off the same website. You can see the property sold for $1.2 million, but the assessed value is only 28 grand. Assessed value is always significantly lower than market value. On his loan application, Donald Trump indicated that Mar-a-Lago was worth $426 million. But Letitia James said no. She claimed it was worth just $18 million. Where did she get such a low figure? She used the assessed value. But again, assessed value has nothing to do with mortgages. Mortgages are always based on market value. And think of the reasoning behind this. If you default on your loan and the bank takes possession of your property, they need to know what the home would sell for in the open market to recoup their losses. That's why mortgages are always based on market value. Assessed value has no bearing on mortgages at all. But she still used it to go after Trump. Now, I'm going to prove to you that her claim that Mar-a-Lago is worth just $18 million is laughable. When you want to know how much your home is worth, you need to know what other homes in the area are selling for. Real estate professionals commonly refer to these as comps or comparables. You need to know what other homes are comparable to the one in question. The problem is, there are no homes that are comparable to Mar-a-Lago. With its 126 rooms spanning 62,000 square feet, there is nothing else like this in the world. I did, however, find one piece of property that is on the market about a mile away. So this is Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. You can see it is so big that it is actually bi-coastal, meaning on one side is the Atlantic Ocean and on the other side is Lake Worth Lagoon. The closest property for sale is less than a mile away, and it just happens to be a vacant lot. This is it. 2 acres with nothing on it but trees. Do you know what it's selling for? $200 million for a vacant lot with nothing on it. No building, nothing. And it's going for $100 million per acre. We're supposed to believe that Mar-a-Lago, with 58 bedrooms and 33 bathrooms, is worth only $18 million? Mar-a-Lago is also 20 acres big. If you took a bulldozer and completely leveled the property, you could still sell it at $100 million per acre and get $2 billion just for the land, with no building on it. But Tish expects you to believe that it's worth only $18 million. There isn't a jury in the world that would believe that. That's why she went after Trump using Consumer Protection Law 6312, because that particular law doesn't need a jury. The case gets decided only by the judge. And in this case, that corrupt judge was Arthur Engoron. Engoron also hates Trump. In fact, he not only donated money to Manhattan Democrats, but he referred to Trump as, quote, just a bad guy who Letitia James should go after. So it was no surprise when he claimed Trump defrauded the bank and needed to pay a $500 million penalty. Another thing that makes this case unique, aside from not having a jury, is that there are no victims. Nobody was harmed by this transaction. And this is the very first question Justice David Freeman asked the state. By the way, all of these judges that sit on the New York Appellant Court, they're Democrats. Democrat judges threw this case out.
May it please the court, Judith Vale for the New York Attorney General's office. All of the defendants repeatedly violated—
Ms. Vale, can you identify any previous case in which the Attorney General sued under Executive Law 6312 to upset a private business transaction that was between equally sophisticated partners, where the supposed victim had the ability and legal obligation to discover the allegedly misrepresented matters by conducting its own due diligence, where the supposed wrongdoer advised the supposed victim through written disclaimers to conduct its own due diligence and to draw its own conclusions, where the alleged misrepresentation almost entirely concerned inherently subjective valuations of properties and businesses.
Yes.
And where the victim never complained about any fraud in the transactional losses from it.
He said a lot there, so let's go back and break it down.
Can you identify any previous case in which the Attorney General sued under Executive Law 6312 to upset a private business transaction that was between equally sophisticated partners?
A private business transaction between 2 equally sophisticated partners. They're both billionaires. This isn't a situation where a big company was taking advantage of a little guy. Deutsche Bank is worth $69 billion. The idea that Trump, a private citizen at the time, somehow took advantage of one of the largest banks in the world is a joke.
Where the supposed victim had the ability and legal obligation to discover the allegedly misrepresented matters by conducting its own due diligence.
Again, a $69 billion company has everything it needs to conduct its own due diligence. They have thousands of appraisers, CPAs, and lawyers to analyze any transaction and decide if they want to move forward.
Where the supposed wrongdoer advised the supposed victim through written disclaimers to conduct its own due diligence and to draw its own conclusions.
Where the supposed wrongdoer, that's Trump, advised the supposed victim, that's the bank, through written disclaimers. Written disclaimers. Trump put this in writing, telling them to conduct their own due diligence and draw their own conclusions. What does this mean? In spite of all the resources that Deutsche Bank had at its disposal, Trump is basically telling them, check my work. These are my estimates of value. Yours might be different. This alone should have had the case thrown out.
And where the victim never complained about any fraud in the transactional losses from it.
Where the victim never complained about any fraud or sustained any losses from it. This is very important. Remember, this case has no victims. And if you have no victims, you have no damages. Deutsche Bank was thrilled to do business with President Trump. They were paid back every penny on time with interest. In fact, when they were called to testify on behalf of the state, their testimony helped Trump. Letitia James told the bank, you were defrauded. The bank said, no, we weren't. We were happy to do business with him, and we would do it again. Now watch this next judge add on to Friedman's question.
And I want to add to his question, and little to no impact on the public marketplace.
Now, the reason she reminds her that this case has little or no impact on the public marketplace is because this particular law, Law 6312, was created to protect the public. It's a consumer protection law. And every time a business has been sued under this statute, there have always been victims. But in Trump's case, there are none. This is such an important distinction. This is why the case should have been thrown out. This is so obvious that even the liberal Associated Press points this out. They reviewed 150 cases and found that victims and losses were key factors in each of them. Consumers had lost money, bought defective products, or never received services ordered, leaving them cheated and angry. But Deutsche Bank isn't angry. They profited from this relationship. Nor were they cheated, nor did they lose money. Another thing unique about this case is that not only did she sue Trump, but she also barred him and his family from operating any business anywhere within the state of New York.
Tonight, a crushing blow to the Trump family's real estate empire. A judge in New York handing down a more than $350 million civil penalty against Donald Trump, plus interest, for lying about his wealth for financial gain, barring him from obtaining loans in the state for 3 years, banning Mr. Trump's adult sons from running any company for 2 years, ordering they pay more than $4 million each.
Letitia James used the power of the Office of the Attorney General to seize his company. This almost never happens. In fact, it's occurred only 12 times since the law was passed more than 70 years ago. And Trump is the only business threatened with a shutdown without victims or major losses. And in cases where the businesses were taken over, it was always used as a last resort to stop the fraud in progress and protect additional victims. In other words, the fraud was ongoing, so the state had to step in and stop it to protect more consumers from being harmed. But this doesn't apply to Trump's case because, number one, there were no consumers. It involved just two parties. And number two, the relationship with Deutsche Bank had already ended because the loan had been paid back. So what ongoing fraud could she have possibly stopped? The AP further states that of the 150 cases analyzed, they could cite just 3 examples where the state took over the business and shut it down. They include a phony psychologist who sold dubious treatments, a fake lawyer who falsely claimed that he can get students into law school, and businessmen who marketed financial advice but instead swindled people out of their homes. What do all of those cases have in common? They all had victims who sustained damages. I know I'm repeating myself, but in Trump's case, there were none. And she went after him anyway. Do you realize how serious this is? Letitia James used the office of Attorney General to try to bankrupt a private citizen. She was obsessed with trying to seize Trump's property. That was all she could think about. She thought about it every single day. Here she is admitting it.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court. And we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
New York AG Tish James is now saying in no uncertain terms that if Trump cannot pay up, she will not hesitate to move in on Trump's assets. She will seize the buildings that bear his name, and hinting that she's already thinking about where to start.
We are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers. And yes, I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day.
She looks at 40 Wall Street, quote, each and every day.
This woman is obviously deranged. She needs help. She is completely obsessed with getting Trump. And don't forget, she campaigned on this. And before I show you that montage, first, here she is denying it.
The President of the United States has complained that I'm engaging in some sort of political witch hunt, that I've got some personal vendetta against him, that I campaigned against him. That is not true.
Okay, as Warner Wolf would say, let's go to the videotape.
I'm running for Attorney General because I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president.
What would you say to people who say, oh, I'm not going to bother to register to vote because my voice doesn't make a difference, or I'm just one person?
I say one name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you.
I look forward to going into the office of Attorney General every day, suing him, defending your rights, and then going home.
I believe that this president is incompetent. I believe that this president is ill-equipped to serve in the highest office of this land. And I believe that he is an embarrassment to all that we stand for.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the ass. He's going to know my name personally.
I love it.
Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho.
He should be charged with obstructing justice. I believe that the president of these United States can be indicted for criminal offenses.
You got to get ready to agitate and irritate until victory is won, but more importantly, until Trump is defeated. His days are numbered. His days are numbered. Lock him up. Lock him up. Lock him up. Lock him up. Lock him up.
It's important that everyone understand that the days of Donald Trump are coming to an end.
It's like she forgot there was videotape. How stupid can you be? Not only to campaign on getting Trump, but then denying that you did it. You don't have to be a legal scholar to understand how dangerous this is. In this country, we don't target people to prosecute. We don't start with the person and then find the crime. We start with the crime and then we figure out who committed it. Tish is doing exactly what they did in the Soviet Union. Do you know who this man is? His name is Lavrentiy Beria. He worked for Joseph Stalin during his reign of terror. Beria not only had Stalin's political opponents assassinated, but he threw them in jail, even those who were innocent. How did he put innocent people in jail? Well, he famously told Stalin, "Show me the man and I'll show you the crime." That is exactly what Tish did. Have we become the Soviet Union? Watch this next clip and tell me that Tish didn't start with the man first and then try to find a crime that he committed.
We need to focus on Donald Trump and his abuses. We need to follow his money. We need to find out where he's laundered money. We need to find out whether or not he's engaged in conspiracy.
We need to find out if he's laundered money. We need to find out if he's committed conspiracy. So at this point, she doesn't know if he's done it or not, but she's going to investigate him to try to find something. That is an abuse of power, and she belongs in jail right alongside the judge who allowed it. Now, here is Peter Navaro. Joe Biden's corrupt DOJ put Navaro in prison simply because he defied a congressional subpoena. By the way, Hunter Biden did the same thing and nothing happened. But Navaro and Steve Bannon work for Trump. So when they defied a subpoena, Joe put them in jail. Here's Navaro speaking right after this penalty was thrown out.
The York Appeals Court has thrown out President Trump's $500 million New York civil fraud penalty. That was prosecuted by Letitia James last year.
Yeah.
The appeals court says it was, quote, excessive. What is your reaction?
Letitia James is another one that belongs in jail. Look, the Democrats, they really overplayed their hand on this because they thought they could take Donald Trump out. They didn't. And in the process, they totally destroyed American people's faith in our Justice Department. And they got him got President Trump a lot of votes because of that. I mean, the book I wrote about that, I went to prison so you won't have to. The whole theme of that thing is that I'm the wake-up call. If they can come for me, they can come for you. So people need to understand that these are bad people. Letitia James, Fannie Willis in Georgia, Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. The question is, how coordinated were they? And that's a question that needs to be answered by an investigation.
Now, you'd have to be insane to believe that none of this was orchestrated by Joe Biden's White House. We know that Letitia James visited the White House, so did Alvin Bragg, and so did Fannie Willis. Joe Biden was clearly behind all of this. I made 2 videos exposing this. I'll put a link up if you have a chance. Please click on it. When Joe was asked about this, watch how he reacts. This is right after Trump was indicted.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, can you tell us, sir, Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir? Do you think the conviction will have an impact on the campaign? We'd love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Should he be on the ballot, sir?
That smile says it all. The bottom line is Tish James and Judge Engoron should both be in jail, and Alvin Bragg and Fannie Willis should be right behind him. Because don't forget, Alvin Bragg also campaigned on getting Trump. Listen to the very first thing he says in this campaign ad.
Whoever has this job, are they going to convict Donald Trump?
Look, that is the number one issue. I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump. We sued the Trump administration over 100 times.
I sued Trump over 100 times and brought a case against the Trump Foundation and held him accountable.
Holding Trump accountable for the Trump Foundation. I led the New York State Attorney General's work and investigation and successful litigation against him and his family for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. And also we had a number of litigations, more than 100 involving the Trump administration. I oversaw the work which sued his administration more than 100 times. I led the Attorney General's work on the Trump Foundation case where we held Trump and his family accountable. When I was at the Attorney General's office, I led our work on the Trump Foundation matter. I also led the team that did the Trump Foundation case, and I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he can do. Started out as a civil rights lawyer, then became a federal prosecutor, ultimately was the #2 lawyer in the New York State Attorney General's office, leading the charge against the racist policies of the Trump administration. I believe we have to hold him accountable. I've litigated with him, and so I'm prepared to go where the facts take me once I see them and hold him accountable. Being a rich, old white man has allowed you to evade accountability in Manhattan. That includes Trump and his children, right? We held him accountable in the Trump Foundation case. My office did the Trump University case. So I've seen a pattern of lawlessness over 20 years. And so I'm inclined to believe all I see in the public domain and know that and believe that there's a path forward there to make a case.
He starts that ad by saying convicting Trump is the #1 issue, even though at the time Trump hadn't been accused of anything. But Alvin Bragg was going to investigate him and find something. That's not what Tish did? That's not what they did in Russia? It's the same exact thing. Now, at the end of that ad, you heard Alvin attacking Trump for being a rich white man. Imagine if the roles were reversed. Imagine if this were a white candidate running for the district attorney's office of Manhattan, and he said we needed to go after someone because they were a black man. Imagine the outcry. Cities would burn. But this is okay because Alvin is attacking Trump for being white. And demonizing white people is perfectly acceptable today, which is why Tish did the same thing.
Stand up to an administration which is too male, too pale, and too stale. Too male, too pale, and too stale. Too male, too pale, and too stale.
Again, imagine if the roles were reversed. If this were a white person complaining, not just complaining, but running and campaigning on there being too many blacks in the Obama administration. Imagine the outcry. Democrats love to scream racism, but they are the biggest racists of them all. That's all I got for you on this video. Thank you for staying to the end. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It will motivate me to make more. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and if you have time, comment. I read and answer all of the comments. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.